Welcome to r/pro revenge, where financial hardships strike our perpetrators and benefit their victims. Our first story, titled Fire My Boss Unethically, Enjoy Paying for My Unemployment Benefits, comes from Caitlin KitKat. I started working for a small branch of a company and got along really well with my boss, the branch manager, and used to compare him to Michael Scott, not to his face. I would have been Jim Halpert in this scenario. After working there for a while, my boss was approached with an awesome offer to go manage a bigger branch a few hours away. This was because the owner wanted to place his son as the branch manager of a small location and needed to vacate a position to do so. My boss graciously turned down the offer. His kids had just started at their new schools, and he didn't want to uproot them again. He'd relocated to take the current position. This was not taken well by our corporate office, but they couldn't fire him for it, not directly. A few weeks later, I saw our office manager, a lady nobody in the office liked, in my boss's office filing paperwork, or so it seemed, which was odd but not alarming. The next week, my boss was going to be on vacation, and all the office staff had to attend a meeting for non-salaried employees at the corporate headquarters. While we were at the corporate thing, our office manager handed out new office keys to all of us, 3, that were there. My boss was on vacation and salaried. I asked, "Why are we getting new keys?" And she said it was because someone lost theirs. None of us had lost our keys. We were all sitting together and could easily confirm this. So I texted my boss to ask him, and he had no clue what she was up to. I got a bad feeling about what was happening. I called him after the meeting and told him to come by my house Sunday when he got back from out of town. I explained that I was 95% certain they were planning to fire him Monday. I didn't know what reason, I just had a gut feeling. I said it was too bad because if he was fired, I wouldn't want to work there anymore knowing that they would do shady stuff like that. He, jokingly, said that he should fire me first, so I could go on unemployment. I laughed and told him that he should write me a termination notice, and then if he doesn't get fired on Monday, it would just be between us. If he does get fired, I could take it to the unemployment office and have proof that I was fired for something that would make me eligible for benefits. So he did, and he was fired Monday, for misfiling paperwork of some sort, and I definitely did not go back to work. They tried calling me in, and I told them that my boss had fired me already. I took the proof with me to the unemployment office and was good to go, until they, former employer, disputed my claim. I had a hearing, on the phone, with the unemployment office and my corporate HR person. HR: He wasn't fired. The paperwork he submitted with his claim isn't the right paperwork. It should have come from HR, not his manager. Unemployment: Why did the manager not do that then? Where is he? HR: He no longer works for the company. Unemployment: Why did he leave? HR: He was fired. Unemployment: Why was he fired? Getting exasperated. HR mumbles: For doing paperwork incorrectly. Unemployment: Well, that is hardly the fault of the terminated employee. How is he to know that the paperwork is invalid that is coming from their supervisor? They told my HR that they could rehire me or not, but my claim was valid. They couldn't rehire me because they'd already filled the position, so I got to collect unemployment for a while before moving on to my next job. My former boss is doing well now, it seems, and I don't feel bad at all. For the record, it is very likely that they would have invented a way of firing me after they got rid of my boss. Had they done that, they would have made certain that my termination was such that I wouldn't be eligible for unemployment. I took that power away from them by getting fired preemptively. I am also positive that when I saw the office manager in his office, while he was away, she was arranging the setup for him to be fired. OP, you did an amazing job capitalizing on an unfortunate event by hitting those fools with a reverse Uno card, securing your unemployment, and swiftly escaping the company. I can't think of a better way to have escaped that situation. Well done. Our next story, titled Be a Racist and Lie on Your Neighbors? Welcome to Eviction, Population U, comes from the user, Just Wait It Gets Better. I used to work in the private security field, not mall cops, but highly trained and skilled armed security. We worked residential buildings and complexes that were very high-end, like $200,000 cars in the parking garage high-end. Now, places like this are Karen Central. Imagine apartments full of Karens and entitled teenagers. Now, the company owner was awesome. A cop as his regular job, he understood what we faced. His advice was to be nice, but put the hammer down if you have to, and don't take their shit. Also, that if we didn't get 2 complaints a month about us for worthless shit, that we weren't engaging the residents enough. So, this is important to the revenge. Each supervisor had 10 to 15 properties under their control. Regular officers patrolled them, but we were in charge of helping with evictions, attending town halls on security issues, deciding how an officer patrols or updating what areas were being a problem or needing to be checked. I had 12. Now, in this one apartment complex, we had a couple always calling us. We have an emergency line from 6 p.m. to 6 a.m. When we get there, they cry about their upstairs neighbor. It was a list of things they just changed. Stomping, music, talking, cooking smells, their dog going number 1 on the balcony and it dripping onto theirs. Valid complaints if we found evidence, and we never did. When they saw we were starting to question if they were real, they changed tactics and went racist. The couple above them were a sweet and wonderful middle-aged Asian couple. Husband was an immigrant, but the wife was born and raised American. These racist cretins had only talked to the husband, so they assumed, as all racists do, that they were both immigrants. So, this white sheet wearing couple started making comments like, "Those Asians," and "They're in America, why can't they cook American food?" and "I'm afraid to be in the parking garage when one of them is driving in it." While it angered me, those comments alone weren't enough for an eviction. Only thing I could do was have my officers put exact phrasing in the report. I did ask the property manager about the comments, and she said if they didn't say them to the residents and the residents didn't complain, there wasn't much she could do. So I tried to think of some way to get them evicted. Not only were they lying to get a couple evicted, but were calling in false things and wasting the officers' time to respond. And they didn't call just every once in a while. They called sometimes twice in one night, usually 5 to 8 times a week. So, a month later, the opportunity was handed to me. The Asian couple called me during the day and informed me they were going out of the country, China, for 2 weeks and no one would be in their apartment. They told me this just in case the other couple started complaining. I would know they were lying and asked to check their door once a night to make sure it was locked and not broken into. I informed the Asian couple to not tell their neighbors, none of them, that they were leaving, and besides myself, only tell the property manager. We had a patrol meeting that night. Officers didn't work in one specific region, so I told them all my plan. I wanted them to respond each time they call and write down exactly what they said happened, and also any racial terms no matter how minor. Mark the report urgent and send it out. We had an online system for all businesses. Email, schedules, report submitting, you get the idea. So away we go. During those 14 days, they complained 18 times. Everything was documented, and I took it to the manager. She looked it over and said, "Let's evict them." Side note, the client gets charged more for emergency response than they do for regular patrols, meaning their lies were costing money. So, there was no HOA because they were rentals. In this situation, myself, the property manager, and the tenants sit down at a table. The charges for eviction are read. If the eviction is security related, then I say what violations have been broken, etc., not opinions, just facts based on the reports which the tenants get a copy of. Then the tenants have a right to speak and ask questions. The property manager then decides what happens next. Do they stay or do they go? So they were sent a formal letter stating they were facing eviction and had 10 days to set up a meeting. If not, the eviction will be processed. They set one up. I get there, and the asshole couple and the manager are already present. The wife immediately digs into me because I was armed. Uniforms for those situations are a dress shirt, slacks, tie, and one weapon and one magazine. Things like elections can be dangerous. I just politely informed her that it was my uniform and not her call to make. She tried to say she will feel uncomfortable and wanted to reschedule, but the manager said this happens now or I will evict you. So they agreed to continue. Now, for legal reasons, these sessions were recorded by video. That way, the tenant can't lie in eviction court or sue. In front of me were all 18 reports and went over each one. Time, date, who called, apartment number. I also read out each line telling them to tell me what they feel is false and what is true. The only thing they said, the racial terms weren't true. At the end of each report, I basically said the report is accurate in the fact that tenants in apartment XYZ were playing their music too loud, but you are complaining the comments about their race are false? I get a yes answer every time. About the 7th one, I think the wife caught one. She started complaining that I was dragging it out. I just smiled politely and reminded her that this was my time and she had ample opportunity to object and ask me questions, but only after I was done. And then went through the rest and let them build a defense. Then, after I was done getting them to admit to lies, I informed them that the tenants in said apartment were actually out of the country at the time of those 18 reports and that the tenants provided proof that they were gone, and my officers checked the apartment one time a night and confirmed that it was empty. Then I smiled pleasantly and ended my part. But the look on their face was a mix of anger and fear. They didn't have a defense. Basically, saying myself and the manager were choosing immigrants over Americans. Oh, did I mention the manager as an immigrant? That went over like a hand grenade in a collection plate. Once they said that, she stopped it and told them she was. That made matters worse because they said she was just taking up for her own kind. During this, I'm calm and collected. Inside my mind, I'm thinking, oh. After a few more racial remarks, the manager just stopped them and said, guilty, and she would process the eviction paperwork with the courts in the morning. Long story short, they were given 14 days. From what I heard, the judge gave them 30 until they called him a racial name. I was able to call the nice Asian couple and let them know that it was over, and they didn't have to worry because we would no longer respond to calls about their apartment for the next 14 days until eviction came through and the bad tenants left. But they were welcome to call anytime if they need help or have an issue. Security officers want to help so badly, but are limited by either laws, property management rules, or both, so it is nice to do some good. Man, it is so crazy how ridiculous some people can be. I mean, who the heck has enough time in the day to make 18 unsolicited false accusations? These people deserve to get evicted. OP, I have to commend you for standing up for what was right and helping out the innocent neighbors. Welcome to r/nuclear revenge, where the Reddit user Atlas Black absolutely destroys the lives of their abominable bosses who tried to frame him. If you stick with it until the end, you will learn how I was framed and fired from my job and accidentally set off a chain reaction that led to a staff overhaul with several managers being fired or moved to other restaurants, the general manager being fired and getting a divorce, and one of the managers being investigated by the FBI and ultimately arrested, as well as several of the workers being deported. Here we go. I used to work at an upscale restaurant owned by a large corporate entity that owns several different restaurant brands. I worked there for about 3.5 years before they eventually fired me, but more about that later. First, I want to give an idea of my role there. My role at the job was a little of everything. Since the day I started working there, I took it upon myself to learn as much as possible. I was very persistent with management when I wanted to learn a new department. I had started as a server, but eventually had worked my way into different departments and job titles, like carryout, hosting, bartending, bar backing, banquets, catering, and deliveries. My singular goal while working there was to make myself available for as many hours as possible. I was being paid about $12 an hour, though that fluctuated if I was working as a bartender or server and making tips. Eventually, it was noticed by management how I fit best into one of the non-tipped positions. I was so good at it that they decided to try me out as an unofficial supervisor over the team that worked in carryout, catering, and deliveries, as those were all one department. I knew this was going to ultimately mean a few less hours since I would only be working one department, so I negotiated with management to increase my pay by about $1.50. Since I was taking on additional responsibilities, they were satisfied with the pay increase. I wasn't trying to get as much money as possible, I just wanted to be able to pay my bills and still have a little money left over for fun. I was living in the highly taxed city of Chicago, which is in the already highly taxed state of Illinois, so it was pretty difficult to make ends meet and still have money left to enjoy my life. I am a person of simple pleasures, and I can enjoy things for long periods of time, so it didn't take much money to be happy. A video game could hold my attention for several months, sometimes even years. I had a family pet that I had brought with me to Chicago, so that counted as an extra expense. Not long after I started this position as the unofficial supervisor, I got a girlfriend, so I was also going out more often and spending money on her. With my position and some smart budgeting, I was able to afford all this. The money wasn't an issue, but management had a high turnover rate, so the incoming managers often did not know what the department entailed or how important hours were to workers of these departments. Eventually, it was noted that our current general manager was going to be fired and replaced. The incoming general manager was supposed to be some rock star when it came to improving restaurants. We looked up his name and found him as the first search result on Google. But the entry wasn't some glowing review of his work ethic or of his impeccable ability to improve the way a restaurant runs. It was actually a mugshot and a police report filed for repeated domestic abuse. This is important later. We'll call him Harvey. Shortly after Harvey came in and started making changes, one of our best managers gave a resignation. She refused to work with him and, like a f***ing oracle, told us to expect lots of sexual harassment, misogynistic comments, and for him to eventually run this place into the ground. Not long after she left, our general manager began replacing our current managers with hand-picked people that he had worked with in the past. Eventually, all but one manager was replaced. That manager was the kitchen manager. We will call him Fredo. Fredo had been there since I started working there. He seemed to be something of a chameleon, As in, his values and ethics seemed to change depending on who his boss was. Honestly, I sort of applaud his survival instincts, but ultimately see him as a suck-up and traitor. Harvey never really replaced the manager for our department, so we ran without a lot of oversight. Unless you count me as a supervisor, we didn't constantly have someone breathing down our necks about how things should be done. Our department had some hiccups here and there, but it still ran really smoothly. Since we did not have our own manager, we often had to radio for a manager to come help us out on things that needed a manager card for approval. Fredo would always be the one to answer these calls since the kitchen was closest to our department. Over time, the new team of managers started to see Fredo as the manager of our department as well. However, the hourly team that worked there still saw me as their supervisor. This meant that anytime Fredo was trying to make changes that would ultimately hurt us, the team relied on me to mitigate those disasters or to negotiate with Fredo to let us do our jobs the way we had already proven worked really well. Over several months, Fredo and I would butt heads dozens of times. He and I were constantly arguing about how important hours were to the workers in his department. He had it in his head that we should be living off of tips like servers, but since most of our orders were carryout, they came in through Grubhub, and Grubhub doesn't tip. We didn't have a lot of deliveries in a day, and the tips we got from those were maybe $10 if we were lucky. But splitting $10 4 ways doesn't add up to a lot. It just showed that Fredo had no clue what he was talking about. Eventually, we had a meeting with our Harvey, Fredo, and all the workers of this department. It was marketed as a chance to voice all our grievances and concerns with the changes they wanted to make with no chance of retaliation. So the workers did exactly that. They talked about how Fredo was trying to cut hours even though he isn't our actual manager. When it was brought up that they were attempting to hire someone to be the manager, the team suggested that I take over since I had already been supervising them and running things smoothly for the last several months. I was also the one that management consulted with when writing schedules, as I had an understanding of the days some workers could and couldn't work depending on their school schedules or family life. I could see at the moment it was suggested that Harvey and Fredo made the decision on the spot that I had to be gotten rid of. Although they didn't say it, I could see the look they gave each other and instinctively knew that my days at this place were numbered and my job was going to be getting the axe one way or another. They made a bunch of promises to us about not cutting hours. They told us that they would stop sending all but one person home early and only leaving one person to clean everything and close up by themselves, as this wasn't a small department and it was simply too much for one person to do alone while still meeting health and safety standards. They promised that whatever hours we were scheduled for, we would work. We weren't trying to be unreasonable, so we told them that we usually have 3 or 4 people scheduled to work our department. They could cut 2 of them early, but we always needed at least 2 people here to help close properly. The promise was made that they would always have at least 2 closers. However, only about a week later, they started sending all but one person home early again every night. One night, they tried to do it while I was scheduled as the closer, and we had just returned from a massive catering event, and there was an unbelievable amount of cleanup left to do for one person. When Fredo came in and tried to send everyone except me home, I stepped up and told him that he was consistently breaking the promise he had made to us during the meeting. He looked me square in the face and told me to stop complaining about it, and if I was going to keep trying to talk to him about him breaking his promises, he could easily find someone who could work my shifts. I quickly realized this was an assassination attempt on my job. He wanted me to press it further, so I backed off and started cleaning. I ended up having to stay way late, and that meant overtime pay anyway. I got a write-up for that, since we weren't allowed to work overtime without a manager's approval. When I refused to sign the write-up, pointing out that I had tried to explain to Fredo that I wouldn't be able to clean up all this stuff alone before my scheduled shift ended, I was allowed to leave without signing the write-up, but only because the HR rep that was present at the time wasn't one of Harvey's cronies. Skip ahead to the day I was fired. It is important to note at this point that I always came into work an hour early. Since we lived in Chicago, food was expensive. However, at our job, we were allowed to have as much free soup and bread as we liked. So I would come into work 1 hour early every day so I could have some soup and bread for lunch before my shift. But on this day, when I walked into the kitchen to get myself some soup, one of the line cooks told me that he had a dish that had been canceled after he cooked it, and Fredo had told him to give it to someone. He assured me that Fredo had already comped it and that it was free to take for whoever wanted it. It just so happened to be my favorite appetizer, so I happily took the free food. Not long after I got to my booth, both Harvey and Fredo approached me and asked me if I had put in a ticket for that food. I told them that the line cook had given it to me and said it was the canceled order that Fredo had already comped. Fredo looked dumbfounded and said he had no idea what I was talking about. So Harvey told me, "I think you know that's theft. Go ahead and finish the food and then grab my stuff and go. That's the last meal you'll be having here." I tried to explain to them that I had been given this food by the line cook, But they refused to listen, so I offered to take them to the kitchen to clear it up with the cook. But by the time I had gone back to the kitchen with them to talk to the line cook, he had already gone home for the day. I had no choice but to gather my stuff, say my goodbyes, and head home. On my way out, I told my people working in my department that afternoon what had happened, exactly as it happened. They were shocked and angry, but mostly sad to see me go. I decided that on my way out, I would stop by the accounting office and pick up any tips that may have been dropped for me that week, just to make sure I didn't get screwed out of that money. Before heading down, I had the gut feeling to just set my phone on record, and I stuffed it into my pocket with the camera rolling. Although the video was entirely black since it was in my pocket, I did manage to get a pretty muffled recording of Harvey and Fredo's voices through the door, discussing how things had gone as planned, and that they had been trying to get rid of me ever since the meeting with my department. I knocked on the door, and they hushed up before opening it. They asked what I was still doing there, and I asked for my tips. They gathered what was in the safe for me and handed it over. Despite my anger rising at what I had just heard, I decided not to burn this bridge just yet, because perhaps I could f***ing nuke it later. I offered a handshake to both managers, thanked them for the opportunity to work there, and left, making sure to pull my phone out of my pocket and record the front of the restaurant with the sign showing its name and logo. Working in a restaurant, you learn to always cover your own ass. It's true for most jobs, but something was just telling me I would need this all later. If I was being accused of theft, I wanted to be able to prove it wasn't true if it ever came up in future job interviews, which is exactly what happened and where this all started going nuclear. On the train ride home, I sent some messages and made some posts on some local groups on Facebook saying that I had just been fired and that I was looking for a job as quickly as possible. By the time I got off at my stop, I had already set up an interview for later that day. I was offered the job about 5 minutes into the interview, but after going over the details, it didn't sound like it was for me, so I turned it down. I interviewed a few other places and found one that was a damn good fit, and a hefty pay increase compared to my previous job, and I wouldn't have to deal with customers. It was an auditing job for a logistics company. However, during the interview with the manager of this job, he mentioned he had already called my previous place of employment and spoken with the general manager, Harvey. Harvey had told him that I had been fired for theft. Luckily for me, the manager I was interviewing with asked me to tell him more about that, and he was willing to let me pull out my phone and find the recording. I asked if the voice in the video was the same as the one he spoke on the phone with. It was. That was confirmation enough for him that I hadn't made a fake video. He listened to the two managers in the video admit that they had set me up, and watched to the end when I showed the front of the restaurant, complete with the logo and name. The manager interviewing me, who we'll start calling Dean, hired me immediately and asked me to send in the recording. I did. I thought that was the end of it. About 7 months later, after settling into this job quite nicely, HR sent out a "Welcome all our new team members" email, which listed all the newest hires, some facts about them, and had pictures of them all. They sent these out every time they hired a new round of people. One of them, Thomas, was a former coworker who worked with me at the restaurant. We had worked at the host stand together, so I was pretty glad to see someone I knew and liked coming onto the team. I sought out his desk and went and said hello and asked why he left the restaurant. He hadn't left willingly. He had been laid off because the company was under investigation. It had started as a relatively small matter. The corporate entity that owned the restaurant chain had received an email with an attached video, my video, that had been filmed from inside my pocket. That was cause enough for the corporation to send someone to investigate internally. Thomas was pretty surprised that I hadn't heard anything about it, since there had been numerous attempts to get in touch with me. As soon as he said that, I logged into the old email I had used when I first applied for the job at the restaurant. I had at least 24 emails asking me to come in to discuss my employment and termination. I never replied. I just didn't care enough anymore. I'd also changed my number since then, so they hadn't been able to contact me by phone. Thomas continued explaining that before corporate had sent someone, Harvey and Fredo had talked with my department and tried to offer them all a small pay increase to spin corporate a story about how I was incompetent at my job and failed to live up to my duties. The day the corporate auditor showed up, there had been a small exodus of people from my old department. They quit on the spot, in front of the lady from corporate, let's call her Audrey, and made sure to rat out Harvey and Fredo before leaving. Strike one for both of them. Strike two came a couple days after Audrey showed Harvey and Fredo the recording that had kicked all of this off. They denied it vehemently, but there was no mistaking Harvey's voice. It's unique. Not only that, but the video also picked up their voice and mine when we shook hands and had a friendly parting of ways, which was something they had already bragged about to Audrey, thinking it made them look better that we were able to part on good terms. This wasn't the actual strike two. That came when it was clear they needed to be separated. So Audrey sent Fredo to work at another restaurant owned by our parent company and temporarily demoted Harvey to manager. This tore them apart. They had once been an inseparable, evil team, but the pressure of the investigation must have pushed them over the edge. They ended up at each other's throats on Facebook, on a public post on the company page. The post had since been deleted, but Thomas explained it as the following. Fredo had been pictured in the Facebook post on the restaurant page, and Harvey made a passive-aggressive comment about how Fredo shouldn't even be in the picture since he had been moved to another restaurant due to misconduct. Fredo saw this comment and said something along the lines of, "At least when people Google my name, I don't show up as the guy that punched his wife." To which Harvey responded, "Very funny from the guy who was cheating on his wife with Janet's sister." Not her real name, but Janet was the girl they appointed to officially supervise my old department after they fired me, the unofficial supervisor. Fredo replies to that by saying, "Like you haven't tried with half the waitresses. They all have stories about you trying to f*** them." The post was deleted, but not before it had been seen by Audrey the auditor. That was officially strike 2. Strike 3 came the next day when Audrey started interviewing the female waitstaff and bartenders, seeing if any of them could confirm that Harvey had tried to make a move on them. All of them were interviewed separately. Several of them had similar stories. Every girl that confirmed Harvey had made a move on them all said he had offered to be their sugar daddy if they would send nudes or stay after closing to fool around with him. Harvey was fired. But that isn't the worst of it. Audrey the auditor wasn't just some random woman from corporate. She was the old regional manager for this area and had personally hired Harvey's wife as the general manager of another restaurant in the city. So she called up the restaurant Harvey's wife worked at and told Harvey's wife everything she had learned from the female waitstaff. We learned later that they had gotten a divorce over him trying to cheat on her after she had already given him a second chance to change after he beat her. I don't know what compelled her to give him a second chance after something like that, but she sure didn't give him a third. After firing Harvey, the line cook who had given me the food was interviewed by Audrey. I don't know how it came up, but at some point, he had let it slip that he was an illegal immigrant. She had his file in her hand, with an Illinois ID and social security number on file. So this confused her, and she pressed him for more information. It turns out that Fredo had some connections and had his own miniature black market going on where he would have fake social security cards and IDs made for the illegal immigrants he was hiring at reduced wages. It had been going on for at least 4 years. Needless to say, this is a felony. With the potential PR nightmare that she was likely dealing with, she felt she had no choice but to alert the authorities. Local PD enlisted the help of the FBI since some of the evidence led them beyond the jurisdiction of the local police. Fredo was arrested and quickly gave up the names of the people working that he had sold social security cards and IDs to. I'm not sure if he gave up all of them, but he did name drop about 14 people, and of those 14, at least half were deported by the time Thomas had been let go. One of them was the line cook that had given me the food the day I was fired. Thomas went on to explain that it had all started with me being fired, but I never sent that recording to corporate. I'd only sent it to Dean when he hired me. I asked him about it, and he told me he had sent it to his wife, since she was a lawyer. He wanted to see if I had a case to maybe sue my old job, since what they had done was wrong. But he also remembered that when we had first talked about it, I had said I'm not the type of person who would try to make millions off an entire company because of the mistakes of 2 assholes. But I'd also said that it would be pretty sweet to see them lose their jobs, too. So his wife had been the one that sent it to the legal team at the corporate headquarters of my old restaurant job. My boss showed it to his wife, who forwarded it to the real head honchos of my old job. They were both just trying to get 2 scumbags fired for what they did to me, but ended up pulling a thread so long that it didn't end until there were sexual harassment accusations, revelations about managers cheating on their wives with girls related to people they had been placed in positions of authority, a divorce, mass layoffs pending investigations, a staff overhaul, an FBI investigation into what could be considered black market dealings of falsified government-issued documents, and at least a half a dozen deportations and probably as many as 14. Hey, original poster. Your story was loco. It was a perfect example of bad people getting greedy about their misdeeds and then eventually getting caught for it. And I'm so happy you ended up getting a boss with such excellent integrity. Hope you two are able to work together for years to come. Welcome to Today I F***ed Up, featuring 2 shady stories where the fun time in the bedroom meets drama in the workplace. This first story comes from the user Balls on a Rolls idiot who accidentally exposed a customer's affair to his wife. I work in a call center where we facilitate service switches for people looking for better deals on household stuff, usually their internet provider or supplier of gas, electricity, etc. We have agents in the field who make sales, then call us for verification with the customer. Simple, right? Not today. See, usually it's company policy not to do callbacks. Nobody wants annoying call center calls, right? So unless the customer specifically requests a scheduled callback, we just don't do them. I had a customer 2 days ago looking for a pretty pricey internet switch, going from some basic setup to a full TV, phone, internet package. The works, all the channels, anytime calls to numbers including international, 500 plus megabit per second Wi-Fi, and it came to over £100 a month. I informed the customer, who's an impatient sounding guy, that because of the price increase, he'll need to have a quick credit check run on him, and it'll mean the call takes a little longer. The guy gets all pissed about being busy and saying he can't waste all afternoon on the phone to some call center. So would it be alright if I called him after the weekend to go through it then? Seemed straightforward enough. This is pretty common. People are always up for the sale until they realize they'll need to spend more than 1 whole minute on the phone. But I scheduled the call anyway and asked if there was a specific time he wanted me to call. He says any time is fine and follows with, if Emily answers, just ask her for me. She'll make sure I get the phone. And gave me a home phone number. Fast forward to today and I make a grave error. See, the application I had from the customer had his home phone number already filled in, which turns out was not the same number he'd given me for today's callback. I called the number I thought was correct, and a woman answered. I say without thinking, oh, hi, I'm calling for Steve to confirm his broadband switch. We spoke the other day. You must be Emily. Cue uncomfortable pause. She says, this is Steve's wife, Amanda. What do you mean I must be Emily? I apologized and said, I'm sorry. When I spoke to him the other day, he said if Emily answered, to just ask for Steve. And she just goes, I knew it. I knew it. And slammed the phone down. After checking the application against the post-it note I jotted some info down on the other day, I realized Steve must have given me the number for where he was going to be today, and I'd instead called his unsuspecting wife at home. Nobody's called into my workplace yet, but if they do, I don't think they'll be happy. Update 1. Well, Angry Steve just called my workplace and has achieved nothing but making himself look like an even bigger dipshit than he already has. Also, for the record, Steve was always a dick who can die in a hole and deserves all he gets. The reason for the today I f***ed up was because I was worried about my job. So I haven't worked here very long, and I'm still learning things about company policy, and it turns out that when an application is put through by an agent, it must be the applicant's own details, according to what they provide the agent. So I was only technically allowed to call the wife anyway, not Emily's home number as he gave me. If he'd wanted to call to a different number, he would have had to have a new application submitted with revised details. It wasn't enough to just give me a different number over the phone, so my job is safe. Phew. However, my manager isn't happy and I'm getting a write-up, but I can live with that. They don't mean much, and I've never had one till now. Always on time, and have taken overtime voluntarily, etc. Anyway, this guy phones up, and before saying anything else, leads the call with one of my colleagues, who, by the way, is a teenage girl in what I think is her first job, and he says, "Put me on with the little thought it would be funny to call my wife earlier after I explicitly told him not to." Obviously, the poor girl was confused, and looked about to ask the room for a manager ASAP. I immediately piped up and said, "Is it Mr. X from insert location?" And she confirmed. So I got her to transfer the call to my desk ASAP. Steve comes on the line and goes, "I bet you think you're, funny, you little prick. Put your manager on the phone and see if you're so smart when you lose your job." So, in my most sarcastic, overcompensating courtesy phone voice ever, I just say, "Of course, sir. Let me just transfer you to someone who can help." Then put him on hold for 20 minutes, hoping it would wind him up even more while I found my manager and told him about the whole situation. He explained what I'd said above, that I wasn't technically in the wrong from a legal standpoint, and then my poor team leader had to quickly explain to Steve that he didn't have a legal claim, but that we're sorry for the distress call. Sucky, I know, but it's a business after all. And now, hopefully Steve's evening culminates in his entire life being ruined. I got a disciplinary write-up for it, but it's over now. The next story comes from the user BleeBlupo. The older woman I've been sleeping with for months is my coworker's mom. It started a few months ago with the onset of coronavirus. I was on Tinder trying to find someone to hook up with during quarantine so as to stay safe and also kill some time. I saw this very attractive older woman and decided to swipe right because, it's every 20-something-year-old's dream to hook up with a MILF. A few days go by and I get a notification that I have a new match. Woohoo! I open up the app and lo and behold, it's the fine-ass cougar I was hoping for. We start chatting and flirting. It's going really well. Out of nowhere, she messages me and says, "I'm not sure how this app works. Do we just meet up to have sex or do we go on a date first?" I was drinking coffee at the time and promptly shot it out both nostrils. My chance had come. I replied back that people generally just meet up to go to the bone zone together, but I'm easy either way. She replies, "Well, good, because I hate formalities." I nearly my pants in excitement. She sends me her address and tells me she's free on Friday and to bring wine. The rest of that whole week was a complete blur of anxiety. I could not this up. So, Friday comes. I show up with the wine. She looks smoking hot. Better in person. We talk about music and traveling and all that. Not many personal details, which would come back to haunt me. Just sort of arts and culture talk. A few glasses of wine later, and we were full-blown going at it like rabbits in the middle of her living room floor. I left a little while later, feeling like I'm the king of the entire universe, and went to sleep. The next day, she texts me saying how she had a great time, and it made her feel young again and blah blah blah. She says she's off every Friday and Saturday for that next week. We should do the same. This has been going on for roughly 3 months. We meet up once or twice a week, like animals, and then go on our merry way until one of us gets horny again. Sweet deal, right? Wrong. I messaged her yesterday saying that I had today off of work and asked if she wanted to meet up. She said her son was taking her out to lunch and that I could come over after 3 p.m. She had mentioned she had a son before, but didn't go any further, and I didn't really care to ask. So, 3 p.m. comes, and I'm almost at her house when she messages me that she's running late. No problem. I park on the road and sort of just wait in my car because her car wasn't in the driveway yet. I'm sitting there listening to the radio when an oddly familiar SUV pulls into the drive. I sort of looked at it funny, and then I immediately realized where I knew it from. My coworker, a 23-year-old male, jumps out of the front seat, goes around to her side of the vehicle, gives her a kiss on the cheek and a hug, and then jumps back in the car. My jaw was on the ground. He reversed out of the driveway, and stupid me is sitting like a deer in the headlights in plain sight. He turns around and is literally 10 feet in front of my car and staring directly at me. My face goes bright red, and I feel like I'm gonna vomit. Me and this guy work together every single day, and I consider him a friend of mine. I even trained him when he started at my company. And the kicker is, I've been telling him in detail about this older lady, and he's been giving me immense kudos about it, saying that it's his dream. He pulls up beside me and looks very confused. Asks me what I'm doing and how funny it was we ran into each other. I panic completely and stumble over my words and pretend like I'm on the wrong street and trying to find my cousin's house. He looks skeptical, but sort of shrugged it off. The whole time his mother is standing there watching us through the curtains. He directs me where to go, and I pull off and then circle back once he's gone. Needless to say, I went inside and told her what was up, and we both sort of sat there in silence before I left. No boom boom today. I am now panicking. There's no way he's not going to know, right? And he's going to realize all these wild escapades with this devil night mistress I've been telling him about is actually his mom? I already called in sick for work tomorrow because I cannot look him in the eye. We'll update if anything happens. Pray for my soul, Reddit. Update. She just texted me and said that we should tell him and come clean because it's the right thing to do. What the f***? How do I politely explain that I've told her son in detail about our escapades, including the time I dripped candle wax on her butthole? She's a freak. Update 2. She's adamant about telling him, even after I informed her about the explicit details I've been sharing since we started doing this. What is wrong with this woman? I'm seriously debating quitting my job. I know her son well, and he's gonna want to kill me. She keeps insisting that he's a grown-up and he should realize that his mother is a person too who desires like any other person. That's not the point. I'm bros. Update 3. She said regardless of what I say, she's telling him tomorrow because she can't live with the guilt and deceit. She won't answer my calls at all. Not going over to her house because she's out somewhere. We'll update again. Let my tombstone read, died doing what he loved best. Update 4. Well, gentlemen, the cat is out of the bag. His mother pulled the trigger and came clean about it all. I don't even know what to say. He called me saying it was super weird and he's but he's not mad because he knows we had no idea. He asked if it was her I'd been talking about the whole time, and I said yes. Then he must have felt suicidal because he asked, "Even all the crazy stuff?" Rip, bro. Needless to say, I laughed and changed the subject. "You've been through enough today, my child." He also said he's going to look for a new job and already gave us 2 weeks notice because it'll be weird working together. Damn. He genuinely just seems bummed as His mother is an idiot and I feel scummy as hell. He also said he put in a transfer so we won't be working in the same building until he's gone. Jeez. Going to see his mom later and telling her we can't do this anymore. She caused him to lose a job and a friend and a reason to go to therapy over something we could have likely played off. I think that's the end of it though. Didn't expect this to blow up so big, but thanks for all the awards and comments. At least someone gained something positive from this roller coaster. Can't believe I made my own son quit his job. Damn. Welcome to r/relationship advice, where these people's ex-spouses won't stay out of their lives. This first story comes from someone whose ex-wife wants to come back 3 years after leaving him and the kids. 3 years ago, my wife was planning on cheating with me with another man. I saw some of the signs and caught them sexting. She felt like our life wasn't what she wanted. We divorced and ended up leaving for the other man. Our 3 kids at the time felt abandoned. I got the house and sole custody of the kids, and she didn't make much effort to see the kids. Granted, they didn't want to see her and were quite vocal about it. Since then, the kids seem to be doing better, but still I feel like they miss their mom, especially my younger twin boy. I've seen my ex-wife a handful of times since then, and I moved on in the sense that I've slept with other women since then, but I'm not dating and don't plan on it until the kids are all done with high school at least. Recently, I learned the man my wife ran off with is now a bankrupt alcohol abuser. She left him and went back to living with her parents. She came over this weekend when the kids were with my brother at his cottage and talked with me, basically pleading for me to take her back, how she made a mistake and lost her savings, the money from the divorce, her kids. She wants to work hard towards us getting back together and raising our kids together. I listened to her, but I didn't really say much, and she left back for her parents' house. The whole situation has my head spinning. On one hand, I want her back so much, and I think with time, the kids would appreciate having their mom back. The other women I've been with are good, but there's always a feeling of something missing. But also, I wonder if she only came back because that man became what he is today. Even if we get back together, I don't plan on getting married to her, at least not right away, and if we did, there would definitely be a prenup. I'd want her to stay with her parents and slowly integrate herself back into mine and my kid's life. There's also the problem that I don't know if I can even accept her. Part of me looks at her as used goods. I know that's bad. We probably need both couples and family therapy. Thinking about the future right now is difficult. I have so many variables to account for. If she left again, what kind of damage would that do to the kids or myself? I just came on here to gain an outsider's perspective. Dude, in my opinion, I don't even see how you're considering this. She'll probably just go and do the same thing again once she regains comfort in the relationship. Don't do it. Our second story comes from someone who is expecting a newborn soon, but their ex-husband won't stop freaking out about it. My ex and I married fairly young. We were each other's only partner and just simply outgrew each other. We divorced in 2016, and 1 year later, I started dating my current partner. The only reason my ex and I are still in contact is because of our dog. We had 2 dogs when we were married, and during the initial separation, he took one and I took the other. He couldn't take care of the dog he took and gave her to his parents without asking me about it. I would have taken her, and then regretted it and threw a fit about not being able to see the other dog. It ended up going to court as part of the divorce proceedings, and now I have to take the dog to see him 1 weekend a month. If you hadn't guessed by now, his being a man-child was part of the reason we divorced. I always wanted kids. He didn't, and he was way too immature and emotionally stunted to have kids anyway. My current partner also always wanted kids, but was widowed young and didn't date again for almost 10 years after his wife died. He'd been widowed for 15 years when we met. We started trying for a baby after getting engaged in December and ended up getting pregnant pretty much right away, and our baby is due in November. I intentionally didn't mention this to my ex. I use social media very rarely, and we have chosen not to announce on social media until after the baby is born. On Saturday, we met up for the scheduled dog visit, which was the first time he'd seen me in a month. Because I'm fairly tall, it took a long time to actually look pregnant, and now I do, 25 weeks. When I saw him, he lost his mind. He went on this tirade about how this was evidence that I was cheating on him and how I never really loved him at all because I let the first person who came along knock me up. I was like, okay, wow, I am not engaging in this conversation. I'm only here to let you see the dog. Bye. So I left, and since then, he's used various masked phone numbers and sock puppet accounts to harass and threaten me. I keep blocking them as they come up, but I am stressed and don't know what to do about it. We have generally had a cordial relationship before, but now I'm like, what the f***? I should just say, this dude and this stupid court-ordered dog visitation and never speak to him again, right? Honestly, OP, if it were up to me, I would keep very close tabs on everything that happens, collecting as much evidence as possible to report him to the police for his hostility and gain full custody over the dog. Then you really don't have to see him again. In this final story, the ex of the fiancé of our original poster was sent their sex tapes, and they made the terrible mistake of watching them. My fiancé, 27 male, and I, 29 female, just got engaged a week ago. I proposed to him when I heard from our friends that he was sad that his proposal plans were ruined by COVID. We have been very happy this past week. I guess this caught the attention of his bitter ex, 28 female. She contacted me on social media and sent me a few videos and said that even though I may be marrying him, I would never be able to satisfy him sexually the way she did. For some background, early on in our relationship, I was a bit insecure about this ex, especially how attractive she was, but my fiancé assured me that he would never ever consider being with her again because she was abusive and used to force him into things he did not like. I soon grew out of these insecurities because my fiancé was an amazing boyfriend and always made me feel loved and very secure. But the ex's message brought back all of these insecurities, and I decided to watch the videos she sent. It was a huge mistake. I have never seen my fiancé so passionate and vocal during sex with me. She even had a video of her giving him a BJ in a public place. I never knew he was into all that stuff. I got really upset and decided to check if he had kept any of these videos on his phone. Turns out he hadn't kept any of them, but I found messages discussing them with his best friend Sarah. Apparently, his ex had sent these tapes to him as well to remind him how good it was between them. He had deleted them right away and blocked her, but was debating whether or not to tell me about this, and thus asked Sarah's advice. The conversation somehow turned into Sarah asking who was better sexually. My fiancé tried to evade the question, but she pressed the issue for some reason. It looked like she was teasing him and was being playful, but after a while, he got mad and sent her a mini rant. The important gist of it was basically this. If you look at it from a purely physical perspective, then yeah, X was better. She was more my type physically and sexually. She was very aggressive and passionate and always took the initiative, which I liked, and she gave one hell of a BJ. But she was also abusive, and towards the end, she started using sex as a tool, and instead of feeling loved, it became a desperate attempt for me to connect with her. Sex with her made me realize that sex was not just about the physical aspect. I feel loved and secure and happy when I'm with her. Even if she is less my type compared to X, the emotional connection means that the sex is automatically great. Although the second half of this rant somehow saves it, I still feel really hurt by his admission that sex was better with her. He did tell me that he liked me being aggressive and taking initiative, and I do try to be more like that, but once things start happening, I end up becoming more passive and let him take the lead. I know I can try being more aggressive, but I'm afraid I can never be as good as her, and I can never be the kind of girl that can give public BJs. Now I wonder if he settled for me despite not enjoying sex as much with me. Logically, I know I don't have to be the best at everything for my fiancé, but it hurts because he is the best boyfriend I have ever had in all aspects that I can think of, and I always thought our sex life was amazing. Now I feel like I just got lucky because I was the first person he dated after that abusive POS, and the bar was set so low that he decided that our relationship was amazing enough to make up for the fact that I was not as good at sex as she was. I feel sad and hurt, and I don't know what to do. The ex managed to ruin what was supposed to be one of the happiest periods of my life. I don't know how to bring this up to my fiancé without sounding like a nut with no self-control who thought it was a good idea to watch the videos and snoop on his phone. Update. As for the update, after posting here and reading the advice and reflecting on my actions, I realized what I did was wrong and a violation of my fiance's privacy. I allowed my insecurities to dictate my actions. Even though my fiance is okay with me using his phone, my intent to snoop made what I did wrong, so I decided to just come clean. I sat him down the next day and told him that the ex sent me the videos as well, and also came clean about the snooping. He was pretty upset, but surprisingly, he wasn't that upset with the snooping. He seemed more upset that his ex had somehow managed to cause drama once again in his life. He told me that he hadn't watched any of the videos because in a majority of them, he was uncomfortable with recording them and only did it for her, and was afraid if watching it made me look at him in a bad way. This made me feel even shittier for what I did, and I apologized again and reassured him that they did not in any way lessen my feelings or respect for him. I wanted him to have some time to process things and decided what to do about the ex and what I did, so I gave him some space. That night, I decided to cook his favorite meal as a sort of apology dinner and discuss things. He seemed in a much better mood. He apologized to me for not telling me about the tapes right away and for being an idiot and not realizing that she would come after me when he had blocked her. He told me he appreciated me coming clean about the snooping and understood how I got carried away and that I could have just talked to him and he would have given me his phone and reassured me that he hadn't kept any of the videos. I asked if he was going to press charges regarding revenge porn, and he told me that he wanted nothing to do with her and that we should just move on and enjoy our engagement and forget the whole thing. I told him it was completely his choice and I support him and would delete the videos and block her right away. Finally, I brought up the text and he apologized to me for the rant. He told me that was the first time in a long time that he had actually thought about who was better and that he had never actively compared me with any of his exes before. He told me he should have just answered it with a simple, "My fiance is better," and tried to apologize again. I told him that he didn't have to sugarcoat anything and that it was his private conversation with a friend and I have no right to be mad when he wasn't really disrespectful about me or our sex life. I also told him that it was okay if she was better and I didn't have to be the best at everything. He explained to me that after talking to Sarah, he thought more about it and that he hadn't really expressed his thoughts well in the text, but he would like to explain it better. "You are the best I have had. I am not lying or sugarcoating anything. If someone asked me who is the most skilled or the most adventurous sexual partner that I have had, then yeah, it would probably be her. But that doesn't really matter because if someone asked me what was the best sex I have ever had, my first thought would be the time when we had sex right after you asked me to marry you. And then it would be the night when you first told me you loved me, and third would be the time when we had sex in the kitchen the day I moved in. For all her skill and experience, she couldn't even make the top 3, and we have the rest of our lives to make sure that she doesn't even come near the top 100. So no, I'm not lying when I say you are the best I have had. I am not going to lie. Despite what I said about not needing to be the best, just hearing what he said, maybe I butchered the quote, he was so much more charming and eloquent, made me really happy. So I kissed him and asked him if he wanted to try and break into the top 3 again. Then we had sex. I didn't really specifically try to be more aggressive, but I tried to focus more on what he was feeling to reassure myself that he was enjoying it as much as I did. That naturally allowed me to be the one in the lead, and it was great. I could tell that he really enjoyed it as well. Good job, OP, for being able to self-reflect and turn the conflict around for the better. Best of luck moving forward.